And an autonomy supportive manager would instead give you rationales for why it is important that you do something in a specific way, and you get some say on it. You give your view, and the manager then also listens to you and tries to acknowledge your feelings about what is going on, and also trying to be empathetic, take your perspective. That's very important, that you take the other person's perspective and put yourself in the shoes of the worker to see that they also have their own life and their own urges and desires and so on. And then we saw clearly that the manager who was autonomy supportive would really end up with workers who were autonomously motivated, also low levels of controlled motivation and high levels of autonomous motivation. So I think these managers in the McDonald's restaurants that you mentioned, they could probably consider trying to be more autonomy supportive and also competence and relatedness supportive, to try to have better relationships with their coworkers, be more autonomy supportive in different ways. And then as I said, well, I didn't say it here, but I think it is important to also understand that there is a difference between autonomy and independence. So when a manager is autonomy supportive, it doesn't really mean that they let the workers be totally independent so that the workers can do whatever they want to. But you give them a structure, and within this structure, you try to make them understand what is important, what is not important, and you try to make it clear that you have the opportunities to make some kind of choices within that structure. And as long as you find your ways that might be better than what the manager suggests, then that's fine, as long as you do what you're supposed to do and you get some kind of output. So I think that's what I've been showing in many of my studies also, that the manager needs to be autonomy supportive.
So these autonomy supportive behaviors that you mentioned, Thomas, and giving a rationale for requests, taking the perspective of your employee. The one drawback, I suppose, I see is, like, these things take time, right? It'd be so much easier if I was a manager to just tell an employee, no, you need to do this, it's your job, end of story. Or to not take their perspective if I'm giving them some, constructive criticism, and just to tell them, no, this is what you did wrong, this is my perspective, change it, right? So I suppose my question is if you have employers, managers listening to this who are thinking, well, that just sounds like it's going to take up so much of my time, I have to learn a whole new way of relating to my employees, how can we help kind of overcome what are, I'm sure, some very reasonable doubts from managers' point of view? Because a lot of them do work in time-sensitive environments, and a lot of them probably, I imagine, would have doubts about the utility of these in a practical way in their day-to-day roles.
Well, first of all, I'm not sure it would take more time in the long run, because if you try to support autonomy, usually if this goes well and you do it in a good way the first time or the first few times, then the workers will probably feel autonomous, and then they will make decisions and take initiatives that you will not have to be managing all the time. So you might take a step back as a manager and do other things that are more important to you while you have installed some kind of autonomy in your workers, and then they will be working even if you don't tell them what to do. So that's the first thing I think would be the advantage. But even if, as you say, if it would take too much time, there is another way where you can learn the workers to be autonomy supportive towards each other. And that's what I found in a study a few years ago, where I collaborated with a consultant and also my colleague from Belgium, Anna van den Broek. And we carried out a study where my consultant, she had developed a program based on self-determination theory, and we developed it together so that it would be more aligned with this perspective. And it was basically that first of all, we trained them to understand what are the needs, the three needs. We had some kind of workshop where they discussed how to support the three needs. But then we also used a tool where we had some cards, and on each card there was a word, and then everyone in the team should draw this card just randomly, and then there would be a word, maybe like cooperative, it could say on the card, and then they would discuss together in the team, how cooperative do I think I am, and how cooperative do you think I am? And then that started a conversation, so that they could give each other feedback on how good they were at this specific thing. So that could be good for the competence. And also they had conversations where they really talked about things that they normally don't talk about. So they got to know each other better. So that satisfied their need for relatedness. But most of all, they took the perspective of the other people in the team. So they could get a view on, okay, that's how you see this word, and that's how you try to be cooperative, while this is what I mean with being cooperative. So then they got a common language, which was sort of supporting their autonomy, because they took each other's perspectives, they could explain what they meant with that thing in the context of work, so that gave them rationales for why they wanted to do things in specific ways and so on. And some words were more related to a specific need, for example, while others were more related to other needs. But that took some time, of course, to have this workshop and then train to use this tool. But once they had done that a few times, it seemed as if their need for autonomy and competence and relatedness went up to a certain extent. And we didn't follow up too long to see how long this stayed at a high level, but it was also clear that the autonomous motivation became higher after they had used this tool. So that's one way that the managers they could also be good role models. Just try to be having a way of interacting with everyone in the organization that shows that they really are autonomy supportive and competence supportive. And then everyone will hopefully see that this is a good way to behave in my company. So I will try also to be autonomy supportive, and that will probably help. So in the long run, I think it doesn't take that much time once you have settled sort of a ground for how we want each other to be in this organization.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It seems like the opposite side of the coin of what we were talking about earlier, where you've got bonuses contingent upon performance might help in the short term, but in the long term, there's a cost to it, and probably going to cost you more in terms of time if you're undermining intrinsic motivation. Whereas this is the flip side of that. Whereas you might take a little bit more time, perhaps, to start to learn a new way of managing, to learn to take perspective of employees, to give a rationale. But because, like you said, you are promoting autonomous motivation, you're actually having employees who take initiative now, don't need to wait for you to give requests, for example, and you're actually saving yourself in the long term and creating a better environment for all. So that really makes sense, the other side of that coin.